This is The Raid, exposing the dark world of America's deportation machine. I'm your host, John Carlos Frey. On today's podcast, we're fortunate to speak with Reverend Jennifer Gutierrez. She's the executive director of CLUE. CLUE stands for Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. It's a coalition of diverse congregations working together for worker rights and economic justice. Reverend Gutierrez is an ordained United Methodist minister and has served as pastor in several Los Angeles churches. She has a Master of Divinity from Claremont School of Theology and is currently working on her doctorate of ministry. Her commitment to CLUE's mission brings a deep understanding of labor and economic justice, as well as the immigration issues facing the community that she serves. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here. You know, I've known about the organization for a while, and when I first heard about it, Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. To me, that sounds contrary to what a minister should be doing. Just on the surface, what business does a minister have dealing with economic justice? That seems to be for corporate heads or for politicians, but your organization is completely focused on that aspect of economic justice.
Yeah. So, clearly, you haven't read the Bible very closely. No offense.
You're probably right. No offense taken.
But as a Christian minister, again, CLUE is interfaith, but my perspective is as a Christian minister, Jesus mentions the poor and poverty probably more than any other issue in the Bible. And that's true in the Hebrew Scriptures as well. I believe that all people of faith should be talking about economic justice because at least for Christians, our leader, that's mostly what he talked about.
Economic justice to you would be somehow leveling the playing field. Those that are struggling, those that can't find a good paying job, you need to raise the living standards. That's a part of your faith?
Yeah, that is definitely a part of my faith. And I would put it this way. Let me give you the ancient description, and then we'll put it in more like current context. So if you think about, we're in November, Christmas is coming up soon, right? For Christians, Jesus is God incarnate in the world, right? Incarnate meaning this is God coming down to the world to be with us, right? So whom did God choose to incarnate in? This baby who was the son of a laborer and his betrothed, who they were not, God could have easily been a prince or the son of some wealthy, magnate of some sort, right? Somebody who built the canals maybe. But no, God chose a laborer and chose a hard life. They were refugees at the beginning of their life, at the beginning of Jesus' life. And so I think there's a clear preference there that God is saying to people who struggle, to working people, to poor people, I am with you. I choose to be with you. And so I think that is basically part of what CLUE does is we are with people. We use the word accompany a lot, basically. We walk with, accompany people who are struggling, just as God did, as Jesus did. And so we believe that is our role as well, to be with people as they struggle and to say, I am here with you because God calls me to be with you and because God is with you. God is on your side.
My first experience with CLUE as a journalist was reporting on actions taken by CLUE to protect undocumented immigrants that were being threatened with deportation decades ago, maybe 15, 16 years ago. And the case or the story that I was following up on was a woman and her son was provided some kind of refuge in a church. Mm-hmm. And at that time, immigration officials were not touching churches. She lived there. They provided her with a home, and she stayed there for quite a bit of time because if she were to leave, she would have been deported or she would have been apprehended.
Right.
I don't know that the times that we're in right now, if you were to provide sanctuary for an undocumented immigrant, that ICE or Border Patrol agents would keep their hands off.
I would say probably not, right? And so we are responding according to the times. So what we have been doing is, well, first of all, CLU has a shelter network of congregations that provide shelter to asylum seekers and refugees, which is a very legal process. And so these are folk who are in a legal process and are seeking asylum in the United States. And some of them are coming out of detention and need a sponsor in order to do that. And so some of our congregations or congregation members have stepped up and to say, we'll be your sponsor, you can live here. So that is one thing that is happening in congregations, that shelter network. The other issue, though, is we want congregations to be a safe place for migrants. What we've been doing is legal trainings around public space versus private space. And a lot of businesses have been doing this as well, restaurants, et cetera, right? So there are spaces inside a business or inside a church or synagogue where they can say, this is private space, and no public person, including an ICE agent, is allowed to enter without permission or without a warrant.
Does that work?
Yeah, it does. So there have been a number of businesses, restaurants in particular, who have received training on, so if ICE were to, let's say, show up in the parking lot and they were notified, they have certain areas of their property, perhaps the kitchen or offices or something like that, that have been designated as private spaces. And all of their workers, anybody who feels like they're at risk, customers included, could go into those spaces. And in order to get into those spaces, the officers would need to show a signed judicial warrant with a specific person that they're looking for, which is not how they're operating right now. Right now they're operating in very general, just sweeping up anybody kind of way. They're
so something like Home Depot, where they're targeting regularly, Home Depot is somehow complicit or allowing them to be on their property?
They definitely are. We had a group of interfaith clergy and other leaders, or between 75 and 100 of us, who were at the Home Depot in Pico Union on Sunday, celebrating Dia de los Muertos, honoring the people who have passed in detention or who have died in Home Depot parking lots or been injured by raids in Home Depot parking lots. And we had issued a letter of demands, including this, that they keep their workers safe, that if they see a raid beginning to happen, that the workers are allowed to come into the store, and any customers as well are allowed to go into the store and go into a safe place. And that they lock the door and don't allow the agents in. We know they can do this because when we did our procession from the sidewalk through the parking lot up to the store, they closed one of those big metal garage doors on us so that we were not able to enter and go deliver our letter directly to the manager. So we know they can keep people out when they need to.
So they have somehow had communication with ICE saying, come one, come all?
I have no idea what kind of communication they've had, but they've been definitely allowing ICE not just into their parking lots, but into their stores.
But on this particular topic, one might say, why are you protecting them? Why are you giving them safe haven in a Home Depot or a restaurant or a store? Because it's a private facility, ICE has to provide some kind of a warrant that they're not serving now, so it protects the individuals. Why are you doing that if they're in the country illegally or they're undocumented? Isn't ICE just doing their job?
I would.
Do you know what I'm asking?
I do know what you're asking, and I think there are several answers to that. One, I would say ICE is not just doing their job in a legal or a normal kind of law enforcement type of way. If they are really looking for criminals that are in the United States that have broken the law other than crossing the border, then they would be going around with warrants looking for specific people, and that's not what they're doing. They are also using very excessive amounts of force. People are being injured in these raids more than you hear on the news, because most folk, when this happens, we've had clergy go in and visit folk in hospitals several times, and the families have told us, we don't want any press or anything. We don't want this to get out because they're a mixed status family, and so they don't want to talk to the press about what happened to their loved one whose leg was just broken in a raid at a Home Depot or wherever. So that's my first answer, is that it's not ICE is not participating in a legal process in the way that we think of legal law enforcement processes in the United States. Second, I would say that we are a country of immigrants, and we can, throughout history, the laws around what is considered a legal immigrant and somebody who's undocumented and not able to get legal status has changed constantly. There are people who've been waiting 20 years for, that's the whole argument, like, oh, just get in line and wait. There are people who've been waiting 20 years to get legal documentation in the United States. That is not a system that's working. So that argument of like get in line and, do it the right way, it's a broken system. There's no way to get in line and do it the right way, right? Yeah. So that's I would say second. The other thing is that, there are people fleeing terrible conditions in other countries, economic conditions, war, gang violence. These are gangs that we deported to Central America, many of them. So like in some ways, like we screwed up their country and deported these gangs. And so now people are being threatened by these gangs that we put there, and they're fleeing back to us. And we're saying, no, sorry. So the whole thing is a very unjust process. And then finally, these are people, right? These are people, their families, and no matter what somebody has done or been involved in the past, the idea that it's okay to, rip families apart, make it impossible for families to be able to support themselves because the breadwinner's been detained or whatever it is, the idea that it's okay for children to grow up in poverty because of these enforcement actions, all of that is just wrong.
I'm going to show my Bible ignorance again.
Sure.
Okay. I remember during Trump's campaign for president, for a long period of the campaign up until the election, he got a huge reaction when this issue would come up from people at his rallies, and they were holding signs that said things like mass deportation.
Yep. And
they would chant, "Build that wall."
Yep.
So there's a large population of people who don't agree with you necessarily.
Probably.
That these people are in violation of the law, and there is a law enforcement entity called Border Patrol or ICE or DHS, and they're doing their job, which is what I had said to you. Mm-hmm. So they don't belong in this country. They don't have a right to be in this country. Let's get rid of them, kind of thing. Does a minister have an authority to sort of step in between?
So I think a lot of those people who were chanting "Build that wall," I think they've been deceived, right? And I think they have an idea of something that's been told to them about what is making the United States, like what's ruining our economy or what's making the U.S. an unsafe place to be. So I think they're coming at this issue from a place that where they've been told to come at it from, right? Saying that, I have heard lots of reports of, in small towns in the Midwest, perhaps, where when there is immigration enforcement action, those same folk who are yelling "Build that wall" are now all of a sudden shocked that it was their pastor that has been detained, or their neighbor down the street that they know, and they know that person's not a criminal, right? They borrowed their weed whacker the last week, So like these are and then they now are understanding that this is not some sort of, targeted effort against criminals who are ruining our country, that this is just a sweep of everyday people like them who just happen to have been born in a different country. I think, so I think that impression is changing as the enforcement by ICE has been so violent and so broad, sweeping up everybody, including citizens, people with green cards, people with, who haven't overstayed visas, they still have current visas, whatever it is.
Children.
It's been children. Yeah, it's been so broad and so violent that I think a number of those people are realizing that, well, this is not what I meant.
Is what I'm hearing from you I'm probably going to butcher the statement, but there's a Martin Luther King statement about an unjust law, that if there is an unjust law, you should break it.
Sure. I mean, I'm a Christian minister, so I definitely hold the laws of God in higher, regard than I do the laws of the created by humans.
So if a law is causing more harm
Yeah.
than good,
Yes.
you don't approve of it.
I do not.
Where do you step in? How do you step in? You said you're in solidarity with this population, with this community, but what specifically can you do? The one situation of providing some kind of safe haven in a private facility, but are there other things that Clue or yourself are doing to advocate?
So we're doing a number of things. First of all, we are trying to care for the community in whatever ways that we can. So we have an immigrant bond fund as a way of getting folk out who were swept up in the raids since the summer, bonded out so they can be with their families until their court date comes
Like
up.
a bail bond kind of thing?
Yeah, basically. So what it does is it allows them, it's just like a normal bail bond in a criminal case, but this is for immigration detention, right? So these are folk who haven't committed crimes.
If I'm in detention, I have to post bail?
If you are eligible for bail. It's a messy process. If you were swept up in the raids over the summer and you have been in the country less than 2 years, you've already been deported.
Okay.
If you've been in the country more than 2 years, then you could be eligible for bond. It's up to an immigration judge to decide if you're a flight risk. Several months ago, there was a ruling by the Board of Immigration Appeals that limited who is eligible for bond severely, but a number of folks still are eligible. And so we have successfully raised money for an immigrant bond fund.
It's not cheap, is it?
They range from the most expensive bond we have helped pay was $40,000.
$40,000. Wow.
And the cheapest bond we've paid was $1,500. So they just range, and it's very arbitrary what bonds people get. Based more on the judge that they happen to get as opposed to anything that has to do with their...
There's not a structure? There's not a menu of options?
Nope.
It's indiscriminate? They're just going to assign a... Wow, that's crazy.
Yep, it is crazy. And so what happens is when we bond somebody out after, then they're able to be released, and then they can be at home with their families. They can work while they're waiting for their immigration hearing. Because sometimes those immigration hearings are years in advance, right? There's no reason for them to be sitting in Adelanto or somewhere else in these terrible conditions, just waiting for a court hearing. So that's one way that we're responding, is just through care, right? Another way that we are trying to offer care for the community is by showing up at immigration courts. So we have over 200 volunteers in LA and Orange County who we've trained to be court observers. And so Monday through Friday, we have people who show up in groups. We ask nobody to do this alone, right? But to go to the mass hearings, which is where you'll have, they're called mass hearings for a reason, right? It's a number of folk that kind of go before a judge, like one after the other, very quickly in succession.
This is if I'm undocumented trying to normalize, regularize my status. I go to an immigration court hearing.
Right. Not necessarily undocumented, but you don't have citizenship status. So you're going to your court hearing to try whatever status you have to try to get it regularized, like you said. And so beginning in June, we began to notice that anybody whose case was dismissed, which, for people who are used to following like court cases, that sounds good, right? That your case was dismissed. It is not a good thing in immigration court when your case is dismissed. It basically means you don't have a case. So anybody whose case was dismissed, ICE was in the hallways at the immigration courts and immediately detaining people.
This was a trick by the administration, right?
Pretty much.
They would dismiss the case knowing that ICE was waiting outside.
Exactly. And then in LA, the detention center is right next to the immigration courts. So they would just be brought down immediately to the downtown LA detention center.
Can I just ask you a couple questions about that? Because I think it's confusing for a lot of people. The individuals who are going to these immigration hearings are trying in some level to do it legally or do this the right way.
Exactly.
And then the court pulls the rug out from under them.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And not only are they trying to do it legally, most of them are doing it without an attorney. So these mass hearings, the people you see there, none of them have attorneys. If they have an attorney, they're showing up, their attorney is showing up for them virtually. So if you go sit in one of these courtrooms, there'll be like several attorneys on succession on a screen that will their case will get knocked to whatever the next phase is, right? And then they start calling up the people who are there who don't have attorneys representing themselves. And some of these folk are, they're underage, right? They should not, like a 17-year-old should not be representing himself in a court of law. I have a 17-year-old, and like, no shade on her, but like half the time she can't even find her like sweatpants, to like whatever.
She's 17.
Exactly, right?
Can you tell me about her case?
So there was a young man that one of our court observers witnessed showing up in court, who I'm not exactly sure what his case was, but he ended up getting a new court date in the distance, which judges will often do, particularly if they see observers in the courtroom. Right? What we have noticed is that when we're in the courtroom, judges will go out of their way to try to be fair and to make sure that the people there understand their case, which is one of the reasons we're there. And so the judge gave this young man extra time to put together, a bunch of documents, collect them, bring them back, and then try to also find an attorney. And so our volunteer went up to him after the hearing and said, listen, like, I'm, do you have like somebody in your life who's like a woman in your life, like a grandma or an auntie or somebody that you trust and that you wish was here with you? And he said, yeah, I do. I have my grandma. And she said, can I be your grandma? Sorry, this story always makes me tear up. Can I be your grandma in this moment? Do you mind if I give you a hug? Which is the other reason that we are there, is to be with people, right? To just be that presence with people. And so whenever people are leaving the courtroom, our observers will go up to them and introduce themselves and say, we're here, as people of faith observing. If their case has been dismissed, they'll tell them, ICE is waiting out in the hallway. Your case has been dismissed. They might take you. Is there someone in your family, emergency contact, that we can call and let them know what happened? So that you don't just disappear, because that's what would happen. They just wouldn't come home, right? And so then we'll call that emergency contact, let them know, what happened. And then we also offer to walk out with them. Not because we're trying to interfere. If when ICE comes up and says, please step aside, I'm going to detain this person, we step aside, right? We're not trying to interfere, but we are there with the person. And we are letting them know, we're praying with you, we're going to call your family. There are people here that are fighting for you, just so they know in that really scary time that they're not alone.
What's the emotion?
What do you mean?
You said I tear up.
Oh, I think there's two things. One thing is just the idea of this young man having to like fight his case by himself. Like, I have children, that is like, it just really is painful, right? But then also, I think the other side of it is the care that our volunteers are providing, just the love that they're willing to show. Like, this is like a half, it's like 4-5 hours of their day that they're willing to spend to go and just be with people that they don't know. And so just that care that they're offering to complete strangers also makes me emotional, right? That people are willing to show that kind of care.
You're describing compassion.
Basically, yeah. Yeah.
But the system as it is right now with the administration is compassionless. I don't really hear much about care. I don't hear about their contributions. I don't hear that these are good people. These are people that need to be gone because they're mostly criminal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's no real space for compassion here. Let's get them out.
Right. And so I think that's why it's extra important for other folk to show that compassion and that care. And I also think it's important during this time to show persistence, because it is not one act. It's not one time of showing up that's going to, make a change, right? There needs to be consistent care for the people who continue to go through this process. So consistently, we are there telling them you're not alone. And also, in that kind of persistence and that consistency, more and more people are coming to do this work. So, we have at CLU, we have a cadre of leaders that we've worked with for a long time that we kind of, count on to do this work with us. In these court observations, these 200 folk that we've trained, 250 now, these are people I don't know, most of them, that are just showing up because they want to do something and they see like how people are being treated, and they, this is something tangible. This is a way that they can be engaged.
So bonding out, being present during the hearing, what else?
We are also part of the Rapid Response Network that that folk have probably heard a lot about. So a number of our folk will show up when there's raids happening in different places. And then also just trying to be with those people who have been showing up, right? There's a lot of secondary trauma from folk who've been showing up at these sites of the raids. Just because it's scary, right? Like seeing masked men jump out of vans and just snatch people away violently, witnessing that over and over again, which is what's happened to a number of our folk who are kind of on the front lines responding to these circumstances. So we've been trying to provide groups, for people to get together and talk and share their feelings and how that's going as well. Yeah.
I'm following quite a few people on social media and reading as much as I can daily. Even though the raids in Los Angeles are not in the news right now, it's happening daily.
Sure is.
They're apprehending people every single day. They're very busy in this county.
Yep.
So you are.
Yeah. No, it's there's a lot going on. Yeah. There was a raid at Home Depot in Cypress Park I believe just yesterday.
Just yesterday.
Yeah. Yep. They're still happening.
Don't you feel like you're losing here?
No, I don't. First of all, I would say I find hope in quite a few things. I find hope in the fact that over 200 people came out to be trained for court observers. I find hope in the fact that we have bonded out 35 people in the last 2 months. I find hope in the fact that anytime that there's like a raid, and let's say you see it on like YouTube or somewhere or Instagram, you see like 5 people in the background with their phones out, filming it. So people are continuing to come out and respond. So I find hope in the fact that the community is showing up, right? And then the other thing is just, I think as a person of faith, I think what faith means is being able to see the world in its not yet version, right? Being able to see the world in a way that we want it to be, how it is not yet. So I hold on to that.
Your vision is something better?
Yes.
I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm just thinking about the facts that are coming your way.
Yeah. Dr. King said that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And as I have emphasized to people over, the past few months, the moral arc of the universe is long. And long, doesn't mean like a few months. It doesn't even mean 4 years, right? Like until the end of this administration. Like the moral arc of the universe is long. But it does bend towards justice. And I hold on to that. I also see that, as there is this, like you talked about the people shouting, build that wall, whatever, and there were so many folk who consider themselves to be Christians who voted for Trump. And there's this, I would say, kind of white supremacist MAGA theology that's wrapped up in the Trump administration and how they speak. But I see people resisting that. I see a lot of people of faith, of various faiths, coming out and saying, but that's not my faith. That's not what I believe. And that gives me hope as well.
I don't mean to burst your hope bubble. I don't, because I think it's necessary, and I'm
Sure.
in sympathy with you as well.
Sure.
But I also know what's coming.
Yep.
There's $170 billion being spent now to build new
Yeah.
detention facilities,
Yep.
to hire more ICE agents. They're deputizing police forces, peace officers. Your local
Yep.
police officer can now become an immigration agent.
Yep.
There is a ramp up happening
Yep.
right now. So what you're seeing and what you're witnessing may get worse, or I would assume it's going to get worse.
It will get worse before it gets better. I have no doubt. So I have two stories to tell, to say to that. One is one of the other things that we've been doing is there is a group of women of faith calling themselves the godmothers of the disappeared that we are supporting. And every Tuesday at noon, they're at the downtown LA detention center. They started in June when the National Guard was, posted up around the detention center. And then it switched to the Marines. Now it's DHS officers. And so every Tuesday they do, it's different, right? Because it's interfaith. So it'll be it'll be a group of Jewish folk one time who are in charge of the, vigil. Next time it'll be like Lutherans, and the next time it'll be Hindus, whatever it is, right? And so it looks a little different each time. But they basically pray, sing. They'll have people who have been impacted by the raids tell stories. And then at the end, they always have a bunch of flowers, and that every person who's there will go and lay the flower down in front of, now they just lay it down in front of the fence. But at the beginning, it was, National Guardsmen who were there, and they have their plexiglass shields, in front of them. And so they would pick one guy and they'd lay their flowers down in front of him. Multiple times when they were doing this, because they were not just saying we are the godmothers of the disappeared, release our children to us. That's one thing they're saying. But they're also saying we're your godmothers too. Like you who are participating in oppressing your community. We're your godmothers too. You don't have to do this, right? And then they would lay their flowers down in front of the poor young man. And I would say about half the time, the poor guy would break into tears. Because he didn't want to be there either, right? He gets it, right? But he needs a job or whatever it is, right? Or his superior told him this is where he had to be. He wanted to be somewhere helping flood relief, because that's what National Guardsmen do typically. And so we have these, just really stirring pictures of, guardsmen or Marines, right, with their big guns and everything, but tears, streaming down their face. So what I would say is the feeling in the country is changing, right? So that gives me hope, right? So when that guardsman or that Marine goes home to their family, what are they going to be talking about? They're not going to be talking about how these raids were important and the work that they did was, important. And, they're going to be talking about their experience, in that vigil. They're going to be talking about how they were welcomed, by these women, but at the same time challenged, right? And that's an example of, I would say, nonviolent resistance, which is the real answer to your question of it's going to get worse before it gets better. Yeah, it is. But as people of faith, we must persist, and we must persist nonviolently. And that's another piece of what CLU has been doing over the past few months. We've been doing it all along. We were part of a training at the Convention Center on July 10th, where we trained over 1,400 people in nonviolent resistance in one go. So there's a lot of people that we're training up to do this work, to resist the evil policies of the administration.
Evil?
Yeah. I would say evil. If you're killing and injuring people in the name of God in the way that they use it, I think twisting the name of God is evil. Yeah.
There's a lot of provocative words there. Twisting. I struggle with this issue.
Sure.
You're suggesting that the moral philosophy that you have is correct?
Of course. That's why I have it, because I believe it's correct.
But so do they.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you ever struggle with the idea maybe they're right and I'm wrong, or you don't go there?
I often wonder if I'm wrong. One of my theology professors in seminary would end she would do this big exposition and at the end of class say, yeah, but on the other hand, I may be wrong, right? which I think is brilliant because you're talking about God. Nobody really knows.
I mean, the President of the United States is the President of the United States in part because he said, I'm going to go after the undocumented. I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to build a wall. He got elected. So there are millions upon millions of people who call themselves Christian or people of faith who support him.
Sure. I don't know about millions upon millions. There were millions of people who didn't show up in that election. So I'm not even sure.
They got 70 plus million votes, but right? Or close to 80 million votes.
Not sure it's still the majority of the country, right? So yes, do I think I'm right on everything? No, definitely not. Particularly when I talk about God, because I've never, none of us have actually been to heaven and don't really know, right? So yeah, I have a lot of humility when it comes to that. But do I think that the MAGA theology is the correct one? No. I have read the Bible and I know that's not correct. But Christianity is at its best when it is countercultural. Christianity is at its best when it is challenging the status quo or what is assumed to be the right way of things. I would say Christianity is at its best when particularly challenging the unjust policies of leaders. If I may, I could get into a little bit of
I would love for that.
Some exegesis here. So you've probably heard, even if you're not a big Bible reader, of the Sermon on the Mount, which is when Jesus was basically expounding to a group of folk gathered outside of Jerusalem. And, there's some phrases you've heard from that. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the poor. Blessed, whatever. This is the Sermon on the Mount that everybody's familiar with. It's also the passage where Jesus says, you may have heard it said an eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, but I say, there is a better way. And this is what scholars will call Jesus' third way. And then this is where Jesus said, if somebody strikes you on the right cheek, you turn the other cheek also. And if somebody sues you for your outer garment, give them the undergarment as well. And if a soldier forces you to go 1 mile with his pack, go the extra mile, right? All of this has been interpreted throughout centuries, right, to mean Christians should be doormats, right?
Sounds like it. It could sound like it.
Could sound like it. That Christians should, somebody smacks you, you turn the other cheek, right? You just take it. Or, go the extra mile, basically means lean in, right? This is not at all what that scripture means, because you have to look at the context of the time and who Jesus was talking to, and the specifics of the words, right? So it's key that Jesus says if somebody strikes you on the right cheek. So you have to think about the culture at the time. People were not allowed to use their left hands. Left hands were for very unclean things. That's the only time you would use your left hand. And even if you gestured with your left hand accidentally, you could get a fine, right? So can't use your left hand. How are you going to strike somebody on their right cheek with your right hand? You're sitting across from me. If I was going to strike you on your right cheek, I can't punch you. I have to backhand you. That's the only way I can strike you on your right cheek. So it is clear that Jesus is talking to people who are in the habit of getting backhanded. Who gets backhanded? This is an unequal relationship. If it was an equal relationship, you would slap them or punch them or something like that, right? But in unequal relationship, master to slave relationship, husband to wife at the time, parent to child, whatever relationship, that's where you would backhand somebody. So Jesus is telling them, if somebody backhands you, your boss, right, your master, then turn the other cheek to them. So what happens if you turn your left cheek to me and look me in the eye and say, do it again?
You can't backhand me.
I can't backhand you. If I'm going to hit you again, I have to do it with a fist. I have to say you're an equal to me.
Turn the other cheek as a form of resistance?
It is a form of nonviolent resistance. It's a form of claiming your dignity as an equal. You're basically saying, do it again. Then that's what nonviolent resistance has always been. is the willingness to take on a certain amount of pain and violence. I mean, Jesus died, right? Martin Luther King was killed, like, all of this, right? Being willing to take on a certain amount of pain and violence, but at the same time, claiming your dignity as a human and standing up for your community and pointing out kind of the unjustness in the system, right? So by doing that, by like turning the other cheek to me, you're saying, what makes you think you can treat me like this? What makes you think you get to backhand me? You don't get to backhand me. You want to hit me again, you have to declare my equality to you.
If Jesus were here today during these times in this situation with immigration raids, what would he be doing?
I mean, I think Jesus probably would be deported, honestly, or in
because
detention,
he was immigrant.
or because Jesus was a refugee. Jesus, in the first years of his life, y'all. I mean, everybody's heard the story of like the wise men who came to visit Jesus. Probably he wasn't in the little manger anymore, but whatever, however old he was at that time. And they went to King Herod, who was king of the Jews at the time, and said, we're trying to go visit the king of the Jews. And Herod is like, what? I'm the king of the Jews, right? Didn't like this. And because of that, went out looking for Jesus. Like, who is this person who's claiming to be the king of the Jews or is predicted to be the king of the Jews? I got to take him out. And so... the Joseph, Jesus' father, the scriptures say, was warned in a dream to leave the country. Basically, he went to Egypt and was in hiding until Herod died. And sure enough, Herod killed all the babies, right? There's a really terrible, violent scripture of Herod killing every male child 2 years and under in the region in an effort to exterminate this upstart king. So this is basically parallel to what a number of the folk who are fleeing to our country are experiencing. And so wouldn't we want to be people that welcomes Jesus, that welcomes the refugee, and say, come, yes, we welcome you, be with us.
It's not what's happening.
It's definitely not what's happening. Yeah, and that's why we have to stand up and resist.
This is a calling for you?
It is, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe that Yes, I believe in the scriptures. I am a follower of Jesus, and so I have to do my best to follow.
It would be Christian of you or Christian-like of you to give refuge and accompany the migrant.
Yes, amen.
Regardless of immigration status.
Amen. And I would say regardless of criminal status as well. We all make mistakes. We know the criminal justice system is not necessarily the most just, thing. It can be corrupted.
But back to this idea of who's right and who's wrong, there's an entire Christian faction who believes the opposite.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to sit down and talk with them about the scriptures.
I'm going to get lambasted for mentioning the word Charlie Kirk, who started an entire organization based on ideas that appear like ethnic cleansing. Mm-hmm. He had strong ideas about immigration and about people who were here without papers.
He had strong ideas.
It's not similar to yours.
It is not. And he had strong ideas about a lot of things. Women, LGBTQ
But
folk.
that was a Christian movement, at least in name.
In name. Yeah. And, I have a lot of compassion for Charlie Kirk's family because folk who are out front, there are so many people, and I would say particularly women, who are being targeted now by the administration, but also by folk who just disagree with them, followers of Trump or others who are being targeted for their public theology. And that's, that is disappointing. It is upsetting that we live in a world where it's not safe to talk about, your views out front.
So if I'm not a Christian leader such as yourself, mm-hmm. and I'm not the executive director of an organization that advocates for migrants, if I'm a Sunday churchgoer and I call myself Christian and I try to adhere to the tenets, the teachings, what am I supposed to do with what I'm seeing? Who am I supposed to be?
Yeah. I would say, number one, what you're supposed to do is care for your neighbors. And so if there are folk around you, everybody just lost their SNAP benefits. You could put out an anonymous call to the, people like in your neighborhood to say, if anybody's lost their SNAP benefits, let me buy your groceries this week, right? I think that's one thing. It's just that care for our neighbors, right? Volunteer for our court observation program. If you're a person with financial resources, donate to the bond fund, or volunteer to be the poor soul who has to sit in the immigration court office and pay the bond, which is like a 4-hour process. Visit folk in detention. There's a lot of things that we can do to just care for each other, to care for our neighbors.
You are suggesting that my Christian teaching requires me to take some kind of direct action.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just don't get to go to church on Sunday and say that's terrible what they're doing. I don't really see a Christian movement trying to solve this. I mean, I know that your organization...
Yeah, I do, honestly. Yeah, I do. I see a broad movement of folk who, whatever faith they claim, who are resisting in the way that they can, right? Another woman this is a lay woman in her 70s, at the beginning responded to one of the raids at, it was at Home Depot in Paramount. And she was, responding, didn't quite know what to do. This was very early on, before a lot of people had been trained. And so she's a woman of faith, so she's like, I'm just going to kneel in prayer, right? Well, she got pepper sprayed while she was kneeling in prayer. And she told me later, she's like, well, it didn't really get me full on. I'm fine, because I was checking in with her to make sure she was fine. And she's like, no, it didn't get me full on. Like, it didn't get in my eyes or anything because I had my eyes closed. I was praying, right? Which is a lovely use for prayer. But just, it's a 70-year-old white woman. Like, this is like, you look at her and you think she's harmless, right? But that's who is standing up for their neighbors. That's who's resisting the regime and coming behind this other movement of folk who are out in front because of their experiences and who they are.
I promise this is the last sort of bit on this subject. I don't want to make it about one Christian group against another Christian group or a set of opposing ideologies. But if you read Project 2025, which is, in some understanding, is a Christian doctrine,
right?
It's created by a Christian organization. It's being followed to almost the letter of that particular doctrine. And the immigration policies and what we're seeing with the administration right now is right out of that playbook.
Yeah, I would push back strongly against the idea that it's a Christian doctrine. It's a doctrine from people in power. And Christianity is not, it has been historically, but that's when it's been problematic, is when it is a religion of people in power. Real Christianity, as you saw by my example with Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, who he was talking to. He was not talking to people in power. He was talking to people who are oppressed, giving them advice on how to stand up to people in power. So that is the Christianity of Jesus. It's not the Christianity of Constantine or the Roman Empire or the current United States empire, right?
He was crucified because he railed against the government.
Sure. Yep. Yes, he was.
So today, Jesus would not be an ICE agent?
I don't think so.
I mean, I'm making fun of it. Of course, I agree with you. But I'm also looking at how the rhetoric is coming down on this issue. They feel like they have the just and right way of dealing with this. They feel like they have God on their side.
Yeah. And I think people tend to, because it's easy, right? And it fits within whatever worldview you have, people tend to kind of follow, right? Well, that makes sense. Laws, right? It seems easy and basic. It seems easy and basic until you see the reality of it, right? In the last Trump administration, everybody was on board until they saw children in cages. And then it was like, oh my God, that's not what I meant, right? or families being literally ripped apart, separated at the border, right? Oh my God, that's not what I meant, right? And I think the same is true now, right? People are like, okay, like laws, fine, makes sense, enforcement makes sense, until they see the reality of it, until they see ICE agents in mass kidnapping people, until they see ICE agents coming out beating people who are just standing there or just trying to run away, until they see some of our court observers in full clerical dress, right, getting thrown aside by ICE agents just for standing next to somebody, right? So until they see like a 70-year-old woman kneeling in prayer getting pepper sprayed, right, then it's like, that's not really what I meant. Then they see like that document, they see the violence that's inherent in that Project 2025 document.
But it's purposeful.
It is.
These tactics are not by mistake.
No, right.
They are warranted. They're standing on laws on the books. They're saying that this is the way that they're going to operate.
They're not even standing on laws on the books. They're just standing on made-up laws half the time.
Fine, but they're doing it on purpose.
No, they're doing it on purpose, and they're doing it in order to make people afraid,
right,
too, right? Like they are targeting organizations. They're suing organizations. They are targeting leaders who are standing against them. They are trying to make people afraid. All of that is true. And from what I have seen, I have been very impressed by the folk who are continuing to stand up and stand up together in community and protect one another and protect these organizations that are continuing the fight in the midst of these targeted attacks.
And you're speaking out here?
Yeah.
You're speaking boldly against the administration?
Mm-hmm.
They can come after your organization.
They sure
They
could.
can revoke your nonprofit status.
They would have a fight, but it's at this point, it's probably not a matter of if, but when. And so all of us who are engaged in this fight are preparing for that.
And that doesn't silence your voice?
No, because I am a person of faith, and I will follow my faith. I will follow Jesus in the way that I believe I should until I can no longer do so.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Raid, available wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about our guests and the subjects we cover, please visit our website at theraidpodcast.org.